Good afternoon. I'm Joan Benz, the program coordinator for Sharp Again. And I want to welcome you all to Sharp Again's Sugar in Your Diet, Friend or Foe for Brain Health. If you, as a reminder, keep your microphones on mute so we have a nice clear recording. And I want to introduce Carol Karp. She is our executive director. She has a short program update for us. And Dr. McDonnell, if you could advance the slide.
Welcome, everyone. At Sharp Again, our mission is to educate and empower people to take care of their cognitive health. We do this in many ways: webinars like this one, in-person presentations, articles, resources, and a website filled with valuable information. But one of the most powerful ways we support brain health is through our small group coaching program, our 6-week program, Sharpen Your Mind, Enhance Your Life. This program provides live education and support led by a certified health coach. These groups meet on Zoom once a week for 6 weeks, focusing on 4 key lifestyle areas that we know have a major impact on cognition and that we have the power to control: nutrition, sleep, exercise, and stress. There is a fee for this program, but through the generosity of our donors, the entire program is just $99. Our next session starts Thursday, May 14th at noon, and registration is open now. Dr. McDonnell, advance slide.
That's funny. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next, we also have some exciting upcoming webinars to round out our winter-spring webinar series. Our next webinar is on Thursday, April 10th at noon. What is homeopathy? With Dr. Suzanne Saltzman. Dr. Saltzman joins us to explain the science behind homeopathic medicine and the benefits of working with a homeopath. And on Thursday, May 15th at noon, please join us for From Chaos to Calm, Downsizing Solutions with Jennifer Bakul, Senior Real Estate Specialist, and Sharp Again's Myra Oni, Certified Health Coach and Brain Longevity Specialist, for an engaging discussion on making downsizing work for you. After today's webinar, you'll receive an email with all the program details, a recording link, and any resources mentioned in this presentation, including these upcoming webinars. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box, and we'll answer them during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Before we begin, a quick note: the information shared today is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Please consult a licensed medical professional for any health concerns. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Penelope McDonnell. Dr. McDonnell graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and the Columbia School of Business and worked on Wall Street for many years. After taking some time off to start a family, she decided to switch careers to become a naturopathic doctor. She attended the University of Bridgeport School of Naturopathic Medicine in Connecticut, a leading accredited university in science-based natural medicine. Dr. McDonnell focuses on prevention as the primary strategy for maintaining health. Welcome. Thank you for joining us to Sharp Again's Sugar in Your Diet, Friend or Foe for Brain Health. Welcome, Dr. McDonnell.
Thank you so much, Carol. I do want to interject. There was an interesting study done recently on health coaches and dementia prevention, and it was extremely positive. So I had to give a plug for Sharp Again's program. Now there's studies out there, and we all need studies, showing that it is a good idea to have a health coach in your life as you age, at any time, but particularly for aging in the brain. Now, back to the subject of the day, which is sugar and the brain. When I was going through these slides, I realized that the most critical message that I'll keep repeating through this now that I've gone through the slides and seen is that the answer to this question, friend or foe, is really different for everyone. And figuring out how you can relate to sugar is really what I'm striving to impart in this discussion. So as we go through, I'm going to give you some tools to do that. So as you can see from this first slide, it sort of tells you what I'm going to dive into. There's a whole pile of sugar and what looks like a very inflamed brain that doesn't look particularly happy. It looks quite excited. And that is what happens when sugar and the brain interact, especially when it's too much sugar. So what is sugar and what do I mean when I say sugar? So sugar is what you would expect, cookies, donuts, the white, lovely stuff that pours out of the box, but it's also glucose and it's also fructose, which is in fruit. And depending on your body, very often your genetics, what you've eaten in the last week, what you've eaten in the last years, how your metabolism, how healthy your metabolism is, sugar affects you, sugar can affect you. And how figuring out how to make that a good effect, or I guess I should say how you need to rein it in. When can you have sugar and it won't act negatively on your body is the key here. So the brain needs glucose. That is its primary and sole energy source. And the body has many ways of producing glucose. You really do not need sugar per se in your diet to have a functioning brain. If anything, what I see in my patient population is less sugar through refined sugars, glucose and fructose, people tend to improve in mental clarity, and we'll get to that as well. So you can have a diet of fats, proteins, and complex carbs and still have a good amount of glucose in your body for your brain. So what does the research say? This is really sort of what we're going to go over in this presentation is where is the research on all of this? And what I repeated, I'm just repeating myself, and how much is too much? How do you monitor it? And how do you find the sugars in your diet? So these are the points that we'll review along with other things. So I read quite a few studies in putting this presentation together, and this was a very interesting study. I have the references at the end of the presentation on how sugar affects mood. There's a wonderful woman. She's written a book, which I also have a full slide on, called The Glucose Revolution. She had a terrible accident, and as a result, she was also a biochemical engineer at Georgetown University. And as she was healing herself, she was noticing in her diet that sugar was really affecting her healing and also her mood. And she decided to do lots of experimentation on sugar and anxiety, sugar and depression in groups as well as on herself. And this study supports everything that she found, that you really can be more depressed, more moody, and more anxious when you have sugar. All of this is amplified as you age. We know that if you give a set diet to women premenopausal and the same diet to women who are postmenopausal, the odds are pretty good that the postmenopausal women will gain weight. How postmenopausal women process sugar tends to be more detrimental to health than before menopause. So again, we're back to the very bespoke nature of sugar and how finding out where you are in life and how sugar affects you now and how that can also change as you age and will most definitely change as you age is the takeaway. So it's important also to understand that when you have too much sugar, the whole point of the study was it gets into the brain and it changes how the brain works. You don't learn as quickly, you don't respond as well, and again, it can also change mood. So the follow-up studies looked at the nuts and bolts of how exactly sugar mechanically affects the brain. So we know that a lot of sugar means that it changes your mood, but what are the mechanics behind all of that? So when you have glucose, sugar in your blood, sugar is very acidic. Your body likes to be alkaline. It likes to be calm, salt water, alkaline. It doesn't feel comfortable when it's acidic. And this is something that when it sees acidity in the blood, it creates inflammation to protect the veins and the arteries from the acidity that's in the blood that's flowing through them. So high sugar comes into the body. The veins and the arteries see this acidic sugar and get very red and inflamed. This creates a need for plaque. The small vessels become caked in plaque as the plaque is trying to soothe the inflamed walls of the arteries and veins. Blood flow gets restricted, and you start having cognitive difficulties. And this is happening all over the body, but it's particularly happening in the brain. So I had an interesting, both of my parents had dementia and died with dementia. And this was many years ago. I was sitting with my mother, and she had one of her favorite foods, which was a piece of cake with lots of icing. And the difference in her mood and how she acted before the cake and after the cake, I remember watching her and thinking, of course, this is just one person, but I definitely see that the study is supported very much by her response. She became much more agitated. She became much more disoriented, and she struggled to speak, which was not normally the case for her. So that's an extreme level, but it does show sugar's effect. Oops, sorry. Oops, sorry, going the wrong way. Well, let's get back here. Sorry, everyone. I seem to have, is my screen still sharing, Joan?
No, it's not.
Hmm.
So you have to go back to share.
Yeah, I have to, there we go. All right. There we go. Okay. So as I was saying, sugar definitely affects the aging brain. And if you'll look at this chart here, the green line is what you would like your blood sugar to look like after a meal. You have a slight rise in the sugar, and then it slowly comes down over a period of hours. Normally, though, if you have a meal that has a lot of sugar, insulin is required to help the sugar get into the cell. So that starts getting pumped out at the apex of that red line. And then the sugar is absorbed into the cell. And then at the bottom, you have much less sugar in your blood, and you actually start to crave sugar. So it's very much a roller coaster of up and down, which is difficult for the brain, it's difficult for the body, and it's very unhealthy. You really want to be on the green line. You don't want to be on the red line. So there were also some very interesting studies on the effect of dementia and sugar on the brain and dementia specifically. And it showed that insulin resistance, and I'll get into exactly what is insulin resistance, insulin resistance and the inflammation that comes from insulin resistance affects the brain and can be a major player in your Alzheimer's and dementia risk. We know that blood glucose dysregulation increases the risk of mild cognitive impairment. So the more and accelerates hippocampal atrophy, and obviously the progression, as I said, of Alzheimer's disease. So regulating your sugar can truly affect the pathway of aging of your brain. So there's a lot in literature about insulin resistance, and I'll explain a bit about what insulin resistance is. But the most important thing, the thing I'd like you to take away, is that insulin resistance, assuming you're pre-diabetic and you're not yet diabetic, which is somebody with a hemoglobin A1C of 5.9 or greater, if you have insulin resistance with diet, it's really not too difficult to reverse. You need 2 to 3 months of very much more careful eating, but I see it all the time in my patient population where they're able to lower their hemoglobin A1C and all of the other markers that we'll review later in the discussion. So if you are diagnosed with insulin resistance or you have markers that show you have insulin resistance, don't panic. It just means that you really need to basically move towards a more keto diet, a more protein and fat-rich diet with fewer carbohydrates and sugars. And over not much time, your numbers will start to re-regulate. So getting back to what is insulin resistance. And I do think it's important to understand, you have an artery and a vein, you have an artery, and it's filled with blood, and the blood has a certain level of sugar. And the purpose of the sugar in the blood is to feed the cells. Cells need sugar, but they're closed. The blood is going by the cell and they're closed, no sugar's getting in. So what comes in to open up the cell for receiving sugar? Insulin. So this is insulin, and it comes into the cell opens, sugar goes into the cell then closes, and insulin is working all through your body to open up the cells so they take in the glucose that they need and close and proceed to function. Over time, if you are constantly having a lot of sugar in the blood, the cell becomes basically overserved. It doesn't want to have any more sugar. So insulin will come in and try and open the cell, and the cell goes, no, I'm too busy working on processing all the sugar that I had half an hour ago. I'm not going to open up. So then insulin needs to increase, potentially 2, 3, or 4-fold, to go into the cell and force it to open so that the sugar goes into the cell and out of the bloodstream, reducing the inflammation and the acidity in the bloodstream. So insulin resistance is this cell that requires 3 or 4 times the amount of insulin coming from the pancreas to open it up and take the glucose in. And this is resolved by having less glucose overall over 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And then the cell becomes much more receptive. We're back to only 2 fingers of insulin to open up the cell because you're taking in less sugar and you're bombarding the cell with less sugary blood. So the goal really is to make sure that you're not over sugaring your cells and requiring a lot of insulin to open them up. So insulin resistance is all the things we talked about, the fact that too much sugar in your blood does. This list is the same as too much sugar. So many newsletters mentioned, many newsletters from hospitals like the Harvard newsletter and Johns Hopkins and Cleveland Clinic, when they put out newsletters, they often talk about advanced glycation end products, and they talk about glycation in general. And I wanted to just discuss this because it's so often in articles on sugar. There is another thing that sugar does when it's in your brain and when it's in your body. It actually caramelizes. And in the process of caramelization, it tends to destroy what it is attached to. So this is a picture of synapses in the brain, and the tips of them are very inflamed. And this is advanced glycation end products are in the tips of these neurons, and they actually heat up and caramelize and then destroy the tips that they're touching. So how do you prevent that? You prevent that by pulling back on sugar. This is sort of the next step after insulin resistance. Actually, it can happen concurrently, but it's yet another way that too frequent intake of too much sugar can affect the body negatively, and most definitely the brain. So we know that there's a correlation between these advanced glycation end products and neurodegeneration. So when you go to your doctor and you get your annual physical, and there's he or she runs blood markers, please make sure to ask for these 4 numbers. Hemoglobin A1C, which is a running average of 3 to 6 months of what your blood sugar level is. You want to be under 5.3%. These levels are supported levels by Dale Bredeson's Apollo group, and Dale Bredesen, who you have probably heard wrote the book The End of Alzheimer's and has just come out with a new book. But I would agree clinically when I see my patients get to these levels, they really notice a difference, often in cognition. Fasting glucose, which is part of your complete metabolic panel, you want between 70 and 90. The lower, the better. Fasting insulin target range is, and that's often not run, please request it. I would say the majority of the time insurance covers it. And it's not a particularly expensive marker if you want to do it through something like Direct Labs, and you want that to be between 3 and 5.5. So this shows if you have insulin resistance. If you're over 5.5, you have a bit of insulin resistance. If you do have insulin resistance, it makes it harder to lose weight. Again, going on a keto diet for a month or more can improve the fasting insulin number and help with weight loss. And then triglycerides, I'd like to see them between 40 and 90 milligrams per deciliter. So those are the big four to target that are the simplest. And as you progress in your sugar journey, don't hesitate to go back and ask to have these redone in 6 months. If you've put yourself on some kind of eating regimen and you really think that it's helping your sugars, go back and see how you're doing and get a benchmark. So what are some strategies for helping you improve your sugar levels? One of my favorite by far is intermittent fasting. Walter Longo, the most well-regarded and deeply studied researchers of intermittent fasting out of the University of Southern California, and he's written quite a few books, and they're well-researched and terrific. He feels that 14 hours is the most effective in terms of fasting. And what does fasting mean? Fasting means that you've taken your last bite of dinner at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and your first bite of breakfast or your first sip of anything, we'll get back to what liquids are included in your fast, at either 8 a.m. if you stopped eating at 6 p.m. or 9 a.m. if you stopped eating at 7 p.m. the night before. Black coffee is fine and does not break your fast. Water does not break your fast. And as any of you who have heard me speak before, you know how much I love lemon water first thing in the morning. And that also is pretty much approved, particularly by the woman who wrote The Glucose Revolution. And I sort of like to throw that in there because it really, at the end of the day, supports good glucose regulation. So that would be and then the other thing, aside from the intermittent fasting, and that would be something that you would do every day. I often recommend to some people trying to fast 1 day a week or 1 day every 2 weeks. And what does that look like? I actually really like bone broth fasts. I know that Bonafide brand is sold at Whole Foods. Kettle and Fire is a boxed brand. Other stores sell their own bone broth, but bone broth is high protein, not too much fat, definitely no carbohydrates or sugar. And that would be 24 hours of a bone broth fast. And that also is very helpful in regulating sugar. This is right out of the Glucose Revolution. This demonstrates that how you eat food in what order really affects the effect of that food on your blood. So the top graph shows that you're eating a pear with nut butter. What the nut butter contains is both protein and fat. And the bottom graph shows that you just have a pear by itself. And you'll notice that the bottom graph rather, shoots your blood sugar up quite high, and the top graph doesn't. So here's an example of, yes, you can still eat pears. Yes, that could really spike your sugars if you have it by itself at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But if you combine it with nut butter, you can enjoy the pear and not spike your blood sugar. So there is a way to eat foods you enjoy that may be a bit more sugary than is acceptable, but it doesn't affect you negatively given how you have combined it with other foods that are protective of the blood sugar spike. So proteins and fats should be eaten first at a meal, vegetables second, and then starches and sugars later on. And this will absolutely affect your spikes. High protein breakfasts also help, making sure I often recommend 12 to 20 grams of proteins. I'm a real fan of smoothies. I am a fan of protein powders, but eggs also, but there isn't enough protein in eggs. I often recommend for those trying to get their insulin numbers down to start having dinner for breakfast and have a piece of chicken. I know that may sound a little outrageous, but it's a pretty powerful protein-rich way to start the day. Now, snacks. This you may want to take a picture of. This is a list of snacks that don't, because of the combination, raise your blood sugar. So the hummus would have some protein, and the carrots, you can have that. Seeded crackers with a slice of cheese. A lot of just combining any nut butter with any kind of fruit. Or you can have macadamia nuts and a square of dark chocolate, a soft-boiled egg. I digress. I'm sure you can read through the list, but I think you get the idea that combining something sugary and sweet that you love with something with a bit of fat and protein, preferably more than less, is very beneficial. So other strategies that are not necessarily the order of what you're eating, taking a walk after a meal really reduces your blood sugar load. Your body finds that it needs sugar for moving your legs while you're walking. So after dinner, go take a walk. Squats. Squats are really in the news these days. This really makes me laugh. Many of my millennial patients will stop a meeting and do a full minute of squats. Squats are pretty incredible for reducing glucose spikes. Weights also, and cardio, of course. I wouldn't have a large meal before cardio, but just fitting cardio in during the week. Say you exercise in the morning. I find in many people that it actually sets them up for the whole rest of the day of spiking less. If they eat the same meal on a Wednesday and on a Thursday, and yet they do cardio on the Thursday, they will spike less with the same foods. So cardio makes a difference. I wanted to talk briefly about continuous glucose monitors. I've had pretty unbelievable success in my practice with recommending these to people, particularly men and women over 60. Hands down, the feedback I get is always a pleasure, because people really start to see and understand how sugar is affecting their blood sugar. So how does this all work? How confusing and difficult is it to work around the app and how to insert the continuous glucose monitor? And I'm going to walk through that. So you'll see here you can get a continuous glucose monitor 2 ways, through prescription, which I rarely see unless you have type 2 diabetes, which is a high hemoglobin A1C of over 5.8 or 9. And are obese and potentially have high cholesterol. It's very hard to get it covered by prescription. So I've had obese patients with hemoglobin A1C of 5.7, which, as we know, 5.3 is the goal, so quite a bit above goal. And they have not been prescribed a continuous glucose monitor. This is a website you may want to take a picture of, where you can get two continuous glucose monitors for around $100. So $50 for one monitor that lasts between 10 and 14 days. So if you decide to order this and it comes in the mail, and it's a cartridge that has this disc that you see in the picture. The disc has a very soft, almost rubbery, I'll call it a spike, but it's not nearly as aggressive as that word makes it sound. You put the cartridge against your arm and click a button on the side. The cartridge glues itself to your arm. I can pretty much guarantee you, I have no patients that have complained of pain, any kind of continuous pain. They definitely feel pressure, but it goes away immediately, and they don't feel it for the time that it's on. To take it off, it's glued around the edges. To take it off, you take it off the way you would a Band-Aid. You dig your nails under the top and you just pull down like you would a Band-Aid. It comes off quite easily. You can shower with it, you can bathe with it, you can exercise with it, you can knock clothes up against it as you're putting on and taking off shirts. It's pretty there to stay because of the glue is good, but it's also, you can remove it. So as you'll see, this woman is holding her phone. They have apps that are easy to download and install, and the apps will track the continuous glucose monitor 24/7. You don't need to do anything except have your phone within 10 feet and have some idea of what you've been eating, so you can watch and see how food affects your blood sugar. I most of my patients really just need 2 glucose monitors and they get it. I like to recommend doing one a season or one twice a year. I don't feel that it's really critical to have one on all the time, day in, day out for months. You can really learn a lot from the 10 to 14 days of one about, especially if you really vary your food and the time you eat and you play around. You know, go to a birthday party, have some cake, see how it affects you, have a glass of wine, see how it affects your blood sugar through the night. It's it's great information. I can't recommend it more highly. And also what I like about this too is it amplifies the fact that everyone is different. So you can do it with a friend. Also something I highly recommend. You two will have the same meal and go out to lunch together and you will probably have completely different results on your app. And it's fun to compare. So there's a lot of discussion on apple cider vinegar before meals, and that helps with lowering glucose. And it's true, it does, but it's not for everyone. Apple cider vinegar is acidic by definition, it's vinegar. And it's fine if you have a robust esophagus, it's not inflamed, and you don't have heartburn, no bloating or regurgitation after meals. Any kind of stomach pain after drinking the apple cider vinegar is absolutely a no-go for apple cider vinegar. If you have none of those issues though, a tablespoon or 2 of apple cider vinegar and a little bit of water right before a meal really helps regulate blood sugar. This is a slide also that I wanted to really spend a moment on. This is a pretty incredible study because what the study showed was that it was done on a pretty significant sized group of men and women. I think it was, forget how many, both men and women who were mildly cognitively impaired. They had been diagnosed as such. And so for 3 months, they had a dietary intervention that was pretty much keto. And the study participants improved their mild cognitive impairment scores. So to me, I guess the point is there's always hope. You can always improve your sugar. You always can improve the effect of sugar on your body. Your body really welcomes any reversal of sugar intake if you can. It will work to try and improve and reverse damage and certainly prevent further damage. So the fact that the brain was actually able to overcome inflammation caused by sugar by reversing the diet was pretty profound. So hopefully all our brains will look like this little puffy pink thing. So the whole objective is reduce the intake of processed sugars and reduce glucose spikes. Of course, again, this is very bespoke, and I strongly recommend a continuous glucose monitor to see what spikes you. And then make sure you aim for healthy blood markers. This is the book that I had referenced earlier. Jessie Housebay is nothing short of incredible. She has a robust Instagram following. And she came on the scene and started talking about how the order that you eat food and the timing that you eat food can change your health and your mood and everything. And the book is very easy to understand. It's probably a top seller among my patient population. The feedback I get from people who've read this book is nothing short of amazing, but I highly recommend it. Here are the studies that I used for this. All of them I recommend cruising through. And
I'll include those links in my email update tomorrow, as well as the link to the book.
Great. Thank you very much. And that's it.
And questions? Nancy, do you have a question? I see
have
you.
a question. Yes, I do. Hi. So I'm Nancy Weiser. I'm under the understanding that diabetic is defined as an HbA1c of 6.5 and over. I understand optimal is 5.3 and pre-diabetic really starts at around 5.9 or 5.7 from what I'm reading elsewhere.
You're right. My scale is different, probably because I'm a naturopath, but yes, I would like to catch somebody way before 6.5. But
Right,
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I think there's so much damage at 5.7 and 5.8. I beg to differ with that scale. I think that for insurance coverage of glucose monitors and potentially for drugs, possibly, but I wouldn't want to wait until 6.5 to start practicing intervention. So
Right.
I get very interested. My attention is definitely grabbed at anything over 5.8.
I understand, but when you said before that it's actually diabetic is
Ah,
diabetic is actually defined as 6.5 and over.
no,
That's the
you're right, Nancy. Yeah,
okay,
no,
okay,
you're
okay.
right. Yeah,
Okay, just
thank
wanted to
you.
get there. And I agree, yes, definitely don't want to be there, don't want to be even at 5.9 and 5.3 is ideal. I agree, yes.
But I just don't want to infer comfort
I
with,
couldn't
oh,
agree
I'm
more.
not at 6.5, I'm okay.
No, I get that.
So I want everybody to really wake up if they see a 5.8 and not think, well, I've got a whole 6 or 7 points to go. I'm okay. No, not for brain health.
No, I agree.
Okay.
As an aside, my daughter uses a continuous glucose monitor for type 1 diabetes, and it is not covered by insurance, her insurance. It's covered by mom.
Thank God for moms.
So when going out to eat, it's a little bit harder to gauge
Yep.
carbohydrate counts, ingredients in the dish that's in front of you, what kind of fats, any helpful hints on guesstimating that?
Yeah. I think that the continuous glucose monitor again is really helpful for finding out what gets you spiking. So we're back to that again. In the absence of that, I think it's really important to go out and have a meal with friends. But I think what you eat can't be the concern. Well, I shouldn't say it shouldn't be the concern, but I often tell people if you're going out to a meal with buddies, have some protein before you head out. We know that protein and fat will really lessen the spike of the meal. The purpose of the meal is to go out and be with others and to have food, but maybe you'll have less of the food that spikes you if you're not starving. So I often recommend pre-gaming, as it were, before you go out for a meal. Now, in terms of assessing when you're at a restaurant, aiming for anything that is fat and protein on the menu, fish in a salad is good, of course. And having the order, we're back to the glucose revolution, the order in which you eat food. She discusses actually the bread basket, and she said, if you're a restaurant and you want somebody to stay hungry through the meal, the best thing to do is to give them bread when they start the meal, because bread will immediately spike their sugars. And as their sugars start to decline, they're going to want more food to spike them back up. And so having bread at the beginning of the meal is really sort of the kiss of death for spiking glucose. I don't recommend it. So you don't want to start with a carbohydrate. No bread basket till later.
My mom always saved it for dessert.
Smart woman.
Instead of cake or that kind of thing. Does anyone else have any questions? Please feel free to just unmute and ask away.
Amy?
I have a question about heredity. I had a grandmother that had diabetes, and I wondered if you have any comments about how our genes are impacted with that.
Tammy, right? Yes? Is that your name?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, it's
it is.
Tammy.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I can't tell you how I want to, yes, I spend a lot of time talking about genetics with my patients. Genetics play an enormous role, and understanding your genetics and the power you have over their expression is also a large part of my practice and helping my patients understand that. I use a company called Intellex DNA, which looks at wellness genes, and they have a large section on blood sugar regulation and the genes that you have that are involved in blood sugar regulation. Those people, and then Intellex DNA also puts in study-supported solutions for helping you. They'll suggest supplements, they'll suggest eating styles, etc. There are some people, for example, that have delayed insulin release, so they spike longer. So yes, genetics have play a huge role. I often find, we're back to the continuous glucose monitor, that's why the two women who are sitting at lunch, each with a glucose monitor on, one is spiked and the other isn't by certain foods. And very often it doesn't always, but very often it has to do with genes. So yes, genes play a large role. And if you have parents or a relative that had diabetes or has issues with sugar regulation, you probably have to be more careful as you age with what you eat, how you eat, and when.
Is there also a different impact based on your age? For example, like a premenopausal versus menopausal woman? 'Cause I certainly
So
know
glad
the changes.
So glad you asked that question. And so few people talk about it. I think I had mentioned the study done by the North American Menopause Society, which I think is now just called the Menopause Society, where they had 250 women pre-menopause, 250 women post-menopause. They gave them the same diet, and the post-menopausal women all gained weight. We know that the microbiome in women, as they change, their hormone status changes, really affects the impact of sugar on their blood. So yes, and it gets worse. So it's important to continue exercising, and if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor for a couple of weeks when you're 58, do it again when you're 65, see what's changed. That really is an eye-opening experience, as you see that your tolerance of things does change as you age. So you're exactly right. But between genetics and aging, both make regulating your sugar a moving target.
I have another question. It seems like there's sugar in everything that we get in the grocery store. And I just wonder if, besides the actual word in an ingredient, sugar, do you have a list of different preservatives and chemicals that they're using as substitutes for sugar that we should be
Yes,
aware of?
maltodextrin, all of that stuff. Try to avoid processed food as much as you possibly can, would probably be my first response. The second is, yes, I can work on a list certainly and add it to this presentation, because pretty much any fructose, even the sucralose that's pretend sugar, which doesn't have a great effect on your stomach, but also doesn't spike sugars, is not great. Any kind of fructose, as I mentioned, glucose, certainly, yes, and good old cane sugar. And honey and agave and all of that has the potential for spiking your blood sugar and needs to be treated as I recommended in terms of the timing when you eat it, what you combine it with, how much cardio and exercise you're getting, all to sort of prevent its negative impact on your blood sugar.
And alcohol sugars, mannitol, sorbitol. They're in a lot of those sugar-free jellies.
Yeah.
Those have
So I don't
ill
find they
effect.
spike, right, I don't find they spike your sugars as high, but they're really horrendous for stomachs, for
Yeah.
digestion. Lots of studies showing that the sugar alcohols, not great. One thing I didn't discuss was the effect of alcohol. Alcohol is also has the effect of pure sugar on the blood. And having a drink before dinner is something I strongly recommend doing when you have a continuous glucose monitor. If you are someone who has a drink before dinner, don't hold back because you're in for quite a surprise. It really shoots blood sugar up high.
And drops
Everyone.
fast.
And then then you drop down, then you crave more sugar and
Mhm.
One more? Yeah. This. Is net carbs a real concept in terms of blood sugar? So my banana that has lots of fiber won't as negatively impact my blood sugar as obviously than a processed food that's made with actual sugar and also doesn't have the fiber. That's my
really
question.
interesting about the banana. So when I popped a continuous, I'm going to tell you my story and then I'll answer your question. I think I first wore a continuous glucose monitor about 5 years ago. I regularly had banana in my smoothie in the morning. And I did it through NutriSense, which had a nutritionist with it. And she said to me on day 3, you need to really like eat not abnormally because you're not getting anywhere if you continue your diet. You don't seem to be spiking enough. So I said, okay, I'll have a banana in the evening. And the banana in the evening spiked my blood sugar and it stayed high. It came down, but it stayed very high for me all night. So we're back. It seems to be, so the whole net carb concept, I think, is too broad. And this whole how you respond to sugar is too bespoke. I think it gives you a false sense of security to think that the fiber in the banana is going to make the spike better. After my experience, I have been able to replicate this in my patients as well, for those who chose to try it. Timing and how you combine foods with a sugary, fructose filled, in the case of the banana, with fats and proteins really matters. So net carbs doesn't seem to hold a lot of water when it comes to sugar spiking, particularly as you age.
So if I start my day with salmon salad and an avocado and then I have my banana, it's better than if I'm running to the gym and I grab my banana by itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
You are exactly right. And if you are going to the gym and you grab a banana, make sure you have a large handful of seeds first.
Okay.
Or nuts or seeds. Yeah.
Thanks.
And then don't have the banana right before bed like I did.
Someone asks banana and cheese together.
Banana and cheese is fine.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Cheese first. Please buy the Glucose Revolution. I have no relationship to the author, but I've just had such incredible feedback from patients. And she dives into all the specifics of food combinations, what works, what doesn't, what time of day, all that good stuff.
Mhm. And anything else?
I just ask a little bit more about the intermittent fasting. I know you mentioned that, we could have some liquids during it, is my, herbal tea before I go to sleep not something that I should be having?
Yes, herbal tea before you go to sleep is great. Lemon verbena, lemon balm, all that stuff, chamomile, go for it. I should have included herbal teas. That's a really nice catch because I'm, as Joan knows, I'm really into herbal teas. So yes, herbal teas with bone broth all day, all the live long day. I think the only tea that might spike in some is licorice tea, but the calming teas, all of them would not have an issue on glucose. Licorice might. But dandelion, also great. Detox teas, good.
Interesting. Never heard of licorice tea.
Yeah. Licorice tea is really great for adrenals. It can be good for blood pressure. It's good for supporting the body's ability to resource energy.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. McDonnell. It
Always
was
a pleasure. Thank you all who
pleasure.
attended. Thank you for your questions. I appreciate them.
And I
Keeps me
will
on my
get,
toes.
I will get the recording uploaded to our YouTube channel later today. And we'll send that email update out tomorrow with our program information and our and the resources from the I'm going to stop this